Hello, my name is Carly Morrison, and I would like to welcome you to this educational presentation as part of the Food as a Business program series supported by MSU Extension, USDA NIFA, and the Southern Risk Management Education Center. The Disaster Preparedness for Food Business program focuses on preparing agricultural operations for unexpected events, natural disasters, and other situations that can affect a business. Our goal is to equip producers and processors with tools to help mitigate these risks. Today we will be covering the 4 steps to creating a crisis communication plan. So the objective of this presentation is to discuss the 4 steps to developing a crisis communication plan. So before we get started, let's review the definitions of crisis or risk and crisis or risk communication. And so we define crisis or risk as a threat or loss, real or perceived, to that which we value. And the keywords here for that definition are real or perceived and value. So this is anything that your target audience believes is a threat to them and has some value in their perception of the situation. Crisis or risk communication is defined as the exchange of information about a crisis or risk. So this is an exchange. So it is an interactive process where you are the receiver and the giver of information. That means that you, as the communicator, must listen to what your target audience has to say and respond truthfully and in a trusting manner to make sure that your target audience sticks with you through the situation, and when things clear up, they're still they have still bought in to your product and your mission. This involves multiple messages about the nature of the risk or crisis situation, and so that's why it is so important to be prepared for these type of situations, so that you are ready to act with truthful, concrete information to help mitigate the situation. This involves messages not strictly about the crisis or the risk, including legal information, institutional arrangements for this crisis or risk management. So according to Covello and Allen, there are 7 cardinal rules to follow when developing that crisis communication plan. The first rule is to involve your target audience as partners in the communication process. The second rule is to allow those target audience groups to participate in decisions that directly affect them. Rule number 3 is to prepare and revise your risk communication strategies often. Rule number 4 is to develop a unique plan for each possible scenario that may impact your food business. Rule number 5 is to pay attention to your audience's concerns and questions and address them directly. Rule number 6 is to gain an understanding of the public's beliefs about the event or risks. Psychological characteristics are definitely more important than the technical details of the risk. And number 7, always be honest. Always have scientific information to back up your messages and be honest to your target audience. So step 1 to developing that crisis communication plan is to assemble a team. At the foundation of a strong crisis communication plan, there is a team of experts in all aspects of your business, including management, external communication, internal communication, customer service, and even the legal aspects of your business. You want to make sure that you have a team in place when disaster strikes, so they can jump into action and mitigate the situation as quickly as possible. As you are developing your plan, you want to make sure that you list the team members' contact information at the beginning of the plan so that Everyone can be contacted when disaster strikes. Step 2, designate a spokesperson. So once you have identified the team members of your risk communication team, figure out who the best spokesperson out of that group of people will be for your business. It's important to designate that spokesperson early so that they can be visible to your audience prior to the disaster situation. You want your audience to be familiar with that spokesperson and already have that trusting relationship with them when they have to step up and deliver difficult information during crisis situations. If your audience is familiar with that person and that trust has been built, then they will be more likely to believe the messages that that person is communicating. It is also important for you to designate a backup spokesperson just in case the person in the number one position is not available when disaster strikes. It may also be important to designate multiple spokespersons for multiple target audiences or platforms and do that early as well, so that when you are practicing, everyone has a unified message and the same message is being communicated, no matter what the platform or the target audience may be. Step 3 is to establish an internal chain of command. So once you've developed your team, once you've put your team together and you've identified that spokesperson, it's very important for you to develop your policies and procedures that you will follow in a crisis situation. It's important to remember that the media will act quickly in these crisis situations, and usually they tend to spin their stories in a negative light, and so the quicker you can respond, the quicker you can head off those negative messages being shared about the crisis communication. So if you are prepared to respond appropriately, you can then protect your business and your brand. So time is of the essence when disaster strikes, and it's important for you to respond quickly. And if you have those policies and procedures in place, that quick response can happen. So step 4 is to prepare and practice for that potential disaster situation. After you have assembled your team and you've established those processes and procedures, then you need to prepare the actual messages you are going to communicate and practice with your team multiple times and often so that you are prepared to jump into action. So when it's time to prepare your crisis communication plan, there are several questions that you need to answer or consider addressing in your plan. And these questions include: what are the risks that could potentially affect your business? What needs to be done to mitigate the risk or the emergency or unforeseen event? Who needs to know? Is that the clients, the suppliers, the consumers, regulatory agencies, the law enforcement, a legal team, emergency response, or the media? And what do those people need to know? Who needs to know, and what do they need to know? Again, who is the company spokesperson, and what are their strengths and weaknesses? And then who needs to act to mitigate the disaster or unforeseen events? Once your team has kind of considered these questions and begun to answer those questions, you can prepare to respond using something we like to call the rule of 3. That's for each question or concern, you develop 3 key messages with 3 items of support for each message. And a message map template is a great way to begin to organize your thoughts and strategically plan for these situations. And you can see here that this message map follows that rule of 3 idea of 3 key messages with 3 items of supporting information for each of those messages. It's also important to note that you will have more than one message map in your plan, depending on who your target audience is, depending on who the stakeholder is and what their concerns are and the nature of the situation. So it's very possible that you will have multiple documents with these message maps with multiple situations. Another really great way to plan is to use a risk communication template, depending on the severity of the situation and the response that you hope to elicit from your communication plan. I've provided some basic risk communication templates here in this presentation, and I would like to highlight a few that are specifically geared towards those really high stress situations. Those templates include the CCO template, the Compassion, Conviction, and Optimism template. We also have the AGL4 template. That's really simplifying your message because whenever we're in high stress situations, we begin to kind of overlook information and really need that message simplified so that the target audience can take it in and understand what's going on. The next template for high stress situations is the 2793 template. And for that recommendation, you should be brief and concise in your first response. No more than 27 words in 9 seconds with 3 messages. This template really goes back to the idea of planning and preparation and practice for these situations. The next template that is really great for those high stress situations is the Primacy Recency template. And the idea behind this template is to provide the most important information or the most important points first and last in your message. First and last, because people are going to pick up on and pay attention to the things that are said at the beginning of the communication and at the end of the communication. So you really want to stick those important items of information at the beginning and the end. And then finally, the last template that's really great for those high stress situations goes back to that rule of 3 idea, where you have no more than 3 messages with 3 supporting items of support information to really back up those 3 main ideas. So as you are developing your crisis communication plan and you're beginning to practice and kind of figure out what that's going to look like in those situations, it's important to remember to reduce that mental noise. So mental noise is anything that is going to prevent your target audience from taking in and understanding your message. So some ways to reduce that mental noise is to stick to that rule of 3 idea, to be the first to respond and respond often, focus on the positive in the situations and provide a sense of hope, community, safety, calm, and connectedness. Include credible sources. It's important to remember that it can take 3 to 4 positive, credible sources to offset 1 negative, credible source. So for every media outlet that's shedding a negative light on the situation, you need 3 to 4 positive, credible sources to reverse that idea. And then lastly, use straightforward, short, and easy to understand words and sentences. In these high stress situations, it's important to remember that people process information at well below their education level. So last but not least, when developing your crisis communication plan, you have to practice. You have to practice, and practice some more. And periodically go back and revisit your plans for your crisis communication situation and edit and revise to make sure you have the most up-to-date information and that everybody's ready to jump into action at a moment's notice when these crisis situations happen. Another piece of advice would be to role play through your policies and procedures And be sure that your spokesperson has the opportunity to practice in front of a camera, because we do funny things when we get in front of a camera, and we want to make sure that we are prepared and have practiced for those situations. So for a quick review of the 4 steps to developing your crisis communication plan, number 1, assemble that team and have a designated spokesperson. Step 2, establish your policies and procedures in case of one of those crisis or risk situations. Step 3, develop strategies for multiple crisis scenarios using that idea of the rule of 3. And then step 4, practice, practice, and practice some more. So with a little preparation, your food business will be ready to jump into action and put your target audience at ease when disaster strikes. I would like to point out a few resources if you would like to dig a little bit deeper into preparing for crisis situations. We have 2 extension publications that are available on the Mississippi State Extension website, Disaster Preparedness for Food Business, an overview, and then Preparing to Respond, the 4 steps to developing a crisis communication plan. Thank you again for joining me today for this educational video for the Food as a Business series. We would like to acknowledge our sponsors, MSU Extension Service, the Southern Risk Management Education Center, and the USDA NIFA. If you need further assistance or have questions about information in this video, contact Dr. Carly Morrison, contact your local extension office, or visit the MSU Extension Service website at extension.msstate.edu.